The tune Resurrections from Celeste is frequently singled out as a highlight of the game's soundtrack. This is the track that plays during the second level of the game, a dream sequence in which our protagonist Madeline wanders into some old ruins and first encounters her evil doppelganger. What if I told you that this tune, which clocks in at 9 minutes in length on the official soundtrack album and is comprised of 4 distinct sections, is built entirely out of 3 compositional ideas? It's true. With 3 broad ideas, this track not only creates a fulfilling arc from the beginning to the end of its 9-minute runtime, it also evolves to fit each part of the level as the player moves through it. How could this possibly be? Well, that's what I want to talk about today. What I want to call a broad compositional idea in this video is any musical concept that's specific enough to be recognizable, but broad enough to be able to explain without using much technical music theory jargon. For example, say you wanted to base a tune off of the idea of chromatically descending triads over top of a bass pedal. You could write a ton of different pieces of music that fit into this description, and they could vary wildly in tone and effect, but they would all also share the character of this broad compositional idea. When I say that Resurrections is composed with just 3 of these musical ideas, I mean that each part of the tune can be related to one or more of these broad musical descriptions that we'll get to as they appear. How these ideas are twisted and varied upon as the tune progresses is the interesting part, and can teach us a lot about what kind of tricks composers use to transform their basic musical ideas. The intro to the tune introduces us right away to the first of our 3 broad compositional ideas, a static A minor chord over top of a descending bass line. The echoey synth arpeggios that fill up these first bars outline a very clear chord progression: A minor major 7, C over G, F major 7 to E. It's not a completely static A minor chord on top of the bass line, but the idea is there. The A in the A minor drops down to a G for the following chord, but the 3rd and 5th of the A minor stay consistent, making this a C over G. The drop down to F underneath an A minor triad turns this into an F major 7, and the slide down to E as our 5 chord sets us up to return back to our A minor tonic and start the loop again. This kind of descending progression in a minor key is nothing new, but a couple of nice details set this tune's take on it apart. Including the major 7th over the tonic A minor chord immediately instills a sense of anxiety in the listener, but it also has an almost curious or questioning quality to it. It almost feels like a morbid curiosity. Combined with the echo effect on the arpeggios, the stage is set perfectly for Madeline to explore these dark and cavernous ruins. The second broad compositional idea of this tune comes in with this piano melody, scalar motion up and down the A minor scale, particularly between the root and the 5th. Seems very broad, granted, but this melody is made up entirely of this compositional idea. A 1-beat pickup gives us a short run up from the tonic to the 5th, which is followed by a 2-bar walk back down the way we came. Both ideas so far are introduced in very simple forms, which leaves room for the growth that will come later on. Already we see a little variation used as the melody drops down to a G sharp over the final E chord, creating an almost dominant function variation of this melodic phrase. After this short melody, the piano comes in with chords that outline the harmony discussed earlier. To contrast the descending bass motion, the top voice of each chord moves stepwise up the minor scale, echoing the idea introduced in the melody just beforehand. After exploring the ruins for a little bit, Madeline comes across a mirror and catches the first glimpse of her evil doppelganger. After a short cue foreshadowing a melody that's to come, the mirror shatters, the doppelganger runs out, and the level takes on new life as these gooey space cubes light up and become interactable. These cubes add a new layer of complexity to the gameplay, and the music mimics this rise in platforming intensity with an added drum groove and synth bass part underscoring the same material from the previous section. The piano melody in this section is a variation on the run down the scale from E to A that we heard before, shifting the accented notes from the 5th, 3rd, and root to the 5th, 2nd, and lower 5th. The highlighted 2nd adds a nice color to the melody that wasn't there before, and while this line does end with a leap down of a 6th, the primary compositional idea of scalar motion between the root and 5th is still very much at the core of this winding melody's contour. After making her way through this part of the level, Madeline comes upon her mirror doppelganger, known unofficially as Badeline, chilling out with the skeleton. The two have an exchange revealing Badeline to be the embodiment of Madeline's self-doubt, and during this scene the music shifts to a much more subdued synth and piano duet. The stripped down section maintains the same broad harmonic idea as the earlier section, but with a variation. Rather than the bass descending through the minor scale, the bass now descends chromatically underneath our tonic A minor chord, giving us this juicy A minor over G sharp, A minor over G, F sharp half diminished, F major 7 progression. This descent is rudely interrupted by a skip down to the flat 5th, E flat, momentarily throwing our expectations of an E coming next before the bass resolves up to give us just that. The way this harmony is spelled out in the arrangement is worth noting too. Rather than a block chord or triad arpeggio hovering over top of this bass motion, we get a simple walk up the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of our A minor scale, unquestionably putting the sound of an A minor chord in our ears juxtaposed against the descending bass. Not only is this an elegant way of spelling out the harmony, but this detail will become even more relevant later on in the piece. Those that are familiar with the game's soundtrack may recognize this melody already, and this is what constitutes our third and final broad compositional concept. This melody is a minor key version of Madeline's theme in the game. You can hear the original in a few tracks throughout the game, most obviously in First Steps, which plays in the first level, and Madeline and Theo, where Madeline's piano melody is intertwined with Theo's guitar. The contour of the melody's opening statement makes it easily recognizable as the tonic leaps down to the 5th before bouncing up to hit the 2nd of the key, moving quickly up to the 3rd to outline our tonic triad. As the major 3rd is such a key point of resolution in this phrase, changing it to be a minor 3rd, as we see in this scene, makes a striking difference to how the melody feels. Besides the obvious minor key transposition representing Madeline's darker half, there are other variations put on the melody to better fit the scene at hand. The melody is rhythmically stretched out through a process called augmentation, where each rhythmic value is doubled to turn the eighth notes into quarters, the sixteenths into eighths, and one bar of melody into 2 bars. This better fits the subdued nature of the scene. After this bar of melody, we get a new response to the first phrase's question as well, a walk down from the 5th to the 3rd, mirroring the walk up that took us there. Now that all 3 of our broad compositional ideas have been revealed, we can see the different ways that they get twisted and rearranged for the climax of the level, a chase sequence where you have to escape the ruins while dodging the doppelgangers that are dogging you. The music ramps up to match the intensity of this sequence, and there's seemingly a lot of new musical material here. But after inspection, you can see how these new elements are tied to the same ideas that were introduced all the way back at the beginning of the piece. First, we see the initial harmonic idea of the static A minor over a descending bass line used once again as the bass descends chromatically from A to F sharp, cutting off the descent there to loop back to the beginning for a 4-bar phrase. The new driving piano riff fills in for the static A minor part of this broad compositional idea by arpeggiating an A minor triad and running down from the 4th to the root. Not only does this plant the idea of A minor squarely in our ears against the descending bass line, if we take the contour of this figure as a whole, we see that it basically descends through the scale from the 5th to the root, a sleek reference to the second broad compositional idea that was introduced. After this section, our final broad compositional idea comes in as the minor Madeline melody makes a return in a rhythmically intense 16th note form. This time, each bar of melody is shifted to follow the chromatically descending bass line, maintaining the recognizable shape of the original melody while solidly outlining the harmony. The 1-2 flat 3 motif bouncing off of the descending bass that accompanied the previous section makes a return too as a syncopated synth bass part, dropping a couple octaves lower and squeezed into a 16th note rhythm through a process called diminution, the reverse of the augmentation process I described earlier. At this rhythm, the figure creates this amazing drive that propels the song forward. A little later on in the track, the tune breaks down and reintroduces the 8th note rhythm version of the minor Madeline theme as the bass part continues its descent past F sharp down to F, E, E flat, and back up to E. After a statement of this interpretation of the melody, it's joined by the same melody that entered after Madeline's encounter with the mirror in the first place, this winding figure that makes its way down from a high E to a low E. The way these two melodies weave together mimics the way that the player and the doppelganger clones chasing them dance around each other as they move through the ruins. As the player makes their way out of the ruins, the music fades down to a simple rubato solo piano arrangement of the second, post-mirror section of the tune that winds down to perfectly conclude the level. Having the control to use this kind of economy of ideas is one of the things that separates amateur composers from the experienced, and taking a look at this tune gives plenty of actionable examples of ways to transform your musical ideas to get more juice out of them, or fit them into a variety of emotional settings. Experiment with maintaining the core idea of a harmony's structure while making variations to the specifics. Try taking a general idea and basing each new melodic motif off of it to some degree, whether it's as simple as running up and down a scale or focusing on a particular interval or chord tone. See how altering the rhythmic accompaniment can completely change the tone of a piece of music even when all other elements stay basically the same. Experiment with adding or removing layers without touching the basic ideas that make the track what it is. There's basically an infinite amount of ways you can alter a piece of music to change its effect while maintaining its core character, and knowing some of these techniques can open up a ton of compositional options. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I have to give a huge shout out to all of the patrons who've been requesting a video on Celeste since the game came out, including but not limited to Riley Zimmerman, Emil Lundberg, and especially Mark Starvagi for his sheer persistence. Sorry it took so long, Mark. Also, if you're going to be in Boston this week, you should definitely check out the 8-Bit Big Band show at the Berkeley Performance Center on October 6th. These guys are crazy. It's a full 30-piece big band full of amazing musicians playing killer arrangements of the most classic video game tunes in history. Special guests joining them for this show include Grace Kelly and my friend Insane in the Rain, so this is a night that you don't want to miss. If you use the code 10JAZZ, you can get $10 off of your ticket, so please check the description of this video for all of the appropriate links. Anyways, if you want to help support the channel like these fine folks, you can check out my Patreon here. If you want to follow me on Twitter, you can do so here. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.